Well, good evening, everyone. What a fun evening and what a great venue. I think the OAA should come downtown more often. What do you think? For those of you that don't know me, I'm John Stevenson, and I have the honor of being the 2017 OAA president. I want to begin by acknowledging the ancestral traditional territories of the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe, and in particular the Mississaugas of the New Credit, in whose territory we are gathering today. This territory is also covered by the Upper Canada Treaties, and it's indeed an honor and a privilege for us to be able to meet and share this important presentation. It's really great to see so many people here this evening to hear from this year's winner of the OAA Best Emerging Practice Award. On behalf of the OAA, I'd like to welcome you to this year's Now lecture. You know, it may be that this lecture series is misnamed. While we are present to hear about what is happening in architecture right now through the work of this very special firm, the talk tonight is really about the future of architectural practice as much as it is about today. Personally, I'm very excited to hear from this year's winner and to learn about their vision of that future and about the exciting work that they are doing. Speaking of the future and of awards, as an update to those of you who may not be aware, the OAA Awards program is changing. It will now operate on a 2-year cycle with the Design Awards and this award, the Best Emerging Practice Award, and other Career Achievement Awards celebrated only in even-numbered years. The awards call for submission goes out annually in November, but this year's submissions are due December 15th, and I want you to note that. This is a change. It's several weeks earlier this year. Also, the awards program is moving to a 2-year cycle, so your next opportunity to submit to the Design Excellence Awards will be in 2020. I encourage everyone to submit this year, and it's easy now that it's online. Winners are announced in March, following the February jury day. We then celebrate the winners by sharing their stories about the impacts architecture makes on our society, communities, and individuals. Architecture impacts everyone, every day. I'm also very excited to mention that in the alternate years, we will be rolling out a new award program, a Challenge Award. Details will be announced next spring, but the goal of this new award will be to highlight the distinct contribution architects and architecture bring to addressing important and topical issues facing Ontarians. The Challenge Awards will invite Ontario-based individuals and multidisciplinary teams with architectural backgrounds and expertise, and that includes students, academics, and allied disciplines, to use their skills and insights in design thinking to respond to a specific challenge focused on an identified area of concern. Stay tuned for more information about this exciting new OAA award program as it is revealed in the coming months. This is the 3rd edition in the Now lecture series since its inception in 2015 as an extension of the Design Excellence Awards and a knowledge-sharing opportunity within the profession. These discussions will be a good learning opportunity for the next generation of architects and all those who are interested to hear directly from those who are forging new entrepreneurial practices. It's really great to see a full house. The event sold out within an hour of the launch of the tickets, and I'd like to congratulate each of you for your quick response. We have a lengthy waiting list. With that in mind, we are videotaping tonight's presentation, and it will be made available on the OAA website and our YouTube channel, allowing us to share it with the broader membership and the public. Watch for its release next month. Tonight, I encourage you to ask questions following the presentation and to take this opportunity to meet as many architects, intern architects, students, staff, and guests as you can this evening. We really want to get the conversation started and get people talking about the impact architecture makes and where the profession is going. The OAA feels strongly that the time is now to hear about the future of our profession. Enjoy the food, drink, and company. I encourage you to engage in conversations on architecture, design, and what practice today can be. And now, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Vanessa Fong, architect, Vice President Communications on OAA Council, who will introduce tonight's speaker. Vanessa?
Well, since I'm the VP Communications, I have to take a picture of this for for all of OAA social media. So, okay, so everybody say BlackLAB. All right. Okay, good evening, everyone. So tonight's event has a significant meaning for the OAA. This is without a doubt a celebration of Ontario's best emerging practice, blackLAB architects. But also, and I think just as importantly, this is a platform that allows blackLAB to set an example for current architects, future architects, interns, who may be considering opening up their own practice one day. It's very hard to aspire to be something that you can't see. So hopefully, tonight's event provides exposure and allows you to see there are many creative talents in the province, but there are also many creative ways to set up an architecture firm in Ontario. Hopefully, tonight's event opens up some doors to allow everyone to see a unique firm, one who not only designs beautiful spaces, but also aspires to build a stronger practice and a stronger profession in Ontario. I think for myself, being an architect in the Toronto area, what's unique about blackLAB is that its 4 founding partners, so Andrea, Joe, Sarah, and Tony, have set up an equal partnership between 3 architects and 1 business manager. Not every firm does this, I'm sure you know. This framework inherently recognizes the important balance that great architecture and architecture as a business must be made. Their success not only hinges on creating modern spaces that people love to live in, as per their website, but on creating a successful professional business. These 2 elements, combined with being good people to work with, established the ethos of the firm back in 2012. blackLAB prides itself on being a flexible, collaborative practice whose work extends to not only architecture, but large-scale art projects, exhibit design, furniture fabrication, and video installations. So a little bit about the 4 of you guys. So Andrea. Andrea studied at the University of Waterloo, where she received her Bachelor of Environmental Studies in 2000 and her Master's of Architecture in 2004. Somebody's phone? Throughout her academic career, her work has been recognized by the University of Waterloo for outstanding achievement in design, by the OAA as well as by the AIA, receiving her Award of Merit upon graduation. Andrea has been working with celebrated architects and urban planners in Toronto, New York, and Montreal since '98, enriching her professional experience on award-winning institutional, commercial, and residential and urban planning projects. She received her professional licensure with the OAA in 2010, and as the co-founder and principal of blackLAB, her interest in the profound connection of built form and landscape continues to resonate in her professional work and brings this unique perspectives to it. Mr. Joe Knight. Graduated with both BA Honors and B.Arch with commendation from the Manchester School of Architecture in England, having previously completed a BTEC, is that right? BTEC? A BTEC, National Certificate in Building Construction at the Gloucester College of Art and Technology in England. Joe achieved professional licensure with the OAA in 2011. Prior to founding blackLAB, Joe spent 3 years working for a prominent UK firm where he focused his skills working on large-scale sustainable master planning projects. Before moving to Toronto, where he focused on design and construction management for a number of new build residential projects in both urban and rural areas, as well as spending time working on several renovation and small-scale commercial projects. Tony Round. He is the graduate of the University of Waterloo as well, with a Bachelor's in Environmental Studies and Master's in Architecture. His professional experience in architecture began in '98, and Tony has been a licensed member of the OAA since 2009. With the other founding members of blackLAB, he saw an opportunity to build a company from the ground up with a focus on client relationships and efficient project delivery. Prior to blackLAB, he spent several years as a senior staff at a high-end residential design firm and took an extensive role in both the design and construction management of custom residential projects, while creating carefully considered and effective buildings. At other firms, Tony has pursued design work in the field of sustainable multi-residential residential developments, and This includes work on revitalization of projects for community housing in Montreal that both renovated and built new apartment buildings while creating locally based green energy infrastructure. And last but not least is Sarah Knight. While managing the financial responsibilities for the firm, Sarah puts to use her Bachelor of Business Administration degree from Laurier and Master's degree from UMIST in Manchester, England. Sarah has brought her analytical skills to blackLAB, which she developed by completing the first 2 levels of the CFA exams while in the UK. So if you put the 4 of them together, it makes blackLAB architects. So I think first up is going to be Andrea to start off the lecture with blackLAB.
Thanks, John and Vanessa, for that very gracious introduction, and also thank you to the whole crew at the OAA who helped put this event together, especially to Pearl, who was our point of contact as we prepared. So it was a real honor to receive the award for Best Emerging Practice this year, and we say this because there is so much inspirational work out there that surrounds us, and so many amazing new voices in architecture, that to be recognized alongside those who have won this award in previous years is humbling. In addition to this award, the OAA also gave us the privilege to speak here tonight with free rein, I might add. We are not theorists, but we are designers who love to make beautiful spaces, experiences, and objects. Not beauty for beauty's sake, but because it's about creating humane spaces and buildings that are sustainable because they'll stand the test of time. So tonight we'd like to talk about tangible things, like how we got to be standing up here tonight. We'd like to tell you about how blackLAB started and what it felt like and looked like as our practice began to unfold and emerge, and our experiences along this path. As in the way we often approach our work, we've decided to share the load tonight, so each of us will be speaking on different facets of our practice. So Tony and I have a long history together, and so does another couple that we got to know, Joe and Sarah. Joe joined Tony and me working at Altius Architecture about 10 years ago. Over time, and after a few extracurricular dinner parties, we realized that we all had similar aspirations and ideas. And although the 3 of us loved our work at Altius, we all had a desire to do what we were doing, but slightly differently. And we wanted to do it for ourselves, to build and to shape our own practice as we envisioned it from the ground up. So one day, the 3 of us left, and we teamed up with Sarah. And we decided that we would launch our practice together as 4 equal partners, 3 architects, and with Sarah's business background, a business manager. It was honestly a terrifying experience to leave a stable job and to start a new practice without the promise of work. We all had kids and mortgages, but we also had laptops, a good work ethic, luck, and blind naivety, and it must have been the latter that prevented any paralysis. From our kitchen table headquarters, we had to quickly come up with a name for our practice. We found a lawyer to draft our partnership agreement. Oh, no. Thank you. So we found a lawyer to draft our partnership agreement, and we registered our practice with the OAA. And Sarah will get into the details of this later. But we also reached out to everyone we knew, all of the builders and consultants that we had worked with in the past, and friends and family. And we found everyone to be very supportive and encouraging, and we also received lots of advice. One bit of encouragement that we received from another entrepreneur, which has stuck with us, was about the positives of sharing this adventure, not as individuals, but as a group, to share the experience of starting a business with partners, and to have others to celebrate the highs with, and to help moderate the lows, and to have someone else to rely on when your own strengths fall short. Although we didn't have any projects to start, we had a few leads. We knew we had to look serious and professional, and the kitchen table wasn't good for our image. So we enlisted the help of a real estate agent and searched for an office space. We found a raw industrial unit in a building in the Junction Triangle neighborhood and signed the lease. This was going to be our home, and we were eager to establish roots. Our building and our neighborhood is very transient and full of designers and makers of all types. And over the past few years, we've had the opportunity to collaborate with a few of them. One of them is a great cabinet maker, Julian Villaseñor, who has done the millwork for a couple of our projects now. And an architectural photographer, Naomi Finley, has shot our office for Toronto Life and our Sunny Lee project for Design Lines. We've also collaborated with another neighbor of ours, Brothers Dressler, at the Interior Design Show this past year. But now I'll go back to our firm's first project, and that was our own office build. With a limited portfolio of work that we could claim as our own, we considered this space to be a blank canvas and an opportunity to show prospective clients about who we were and how we work. As a way to save money, we built our office furniture ourselves, as if we were creating spaces within a space. We built a single long central table that did everything we needed it to do. Along it, we each had our own personal workspaces. It housed our library, and our meeting space was at the end of it. We also had a big blank wall to work with, and without any projects to start, we had the time to do something spectacular with it. Something that would pique the interest of the design community and prospective clients. We built a large-scale mosaic installation with golf tees. And after working on it for several months, the image of an aerial photograph of our neighborhood materialized, and a big pink arrow positioned our new firm on the map and our starting point. And the T-wall was the seed for a new, more experimental direction for us to start exploring, and Tony will get into this a little bit later. But from here, our networks continued to grow. After our office was completed, we reached out to some design publications. Tori Healy at Design Lines took an interest in our story and our T-wall, and she featured us in the magazine as a new up-and-coming firm. This Design Lines article also caught the interest of Karen Kang at Informa Canada, who is the director for the annual Interior Design Show. For IDS 13, Karen invited us to participate in the feature exhibit, which explored how designers work. We are only about 9 months into blackLAB, and we are excited to be given the opportunity to build on our contacts and get our name out there. Although we didn't get any work directly from our involvement in the show, we did meet a lot of interesting people and spent time getting to know the designers that were also invited to participate alongside us in the exhibit, including Samar and Igloo out of Montreal, and Heather Doubledam and Company, and Joe Loblaw and Company, with whom we've had the pleasure of collaborating over the years on several projects. So we spent the weekend chatting with everyone wandering through our booth who took an interest in what we were doing. Another Toronto architect whose work we find to be quite inspirational, Donald Chong, stopped in to introduce himself, and he said something very interesting to us. And if I may quote him loosely, it went something like, "Architecture practices are like sourdough. If you break off a little piece, it starts growing into something new." And he also added that there always seems to be plenty of work to feed everybody. But at that point in time, in our firm's timeline, we still had our fingers crossed as jobs were very slowly trickling in. So IDS 13 marked the end of year one. It was a huge effort to get to where we were. We made mistakes and learned a lot from them. For example, we experimented with paying for advertising, and we also tried distributing postcards in a neighborhood. All of this did absolutely nothing for us. On the other hand, we had found that magazines and newspapers and newspaper features reach so many more people, and design writers are always looking for new content. So we've learned to keep them in the loop with our current work. Even articles that are now years old are sometimes mentioned when potential clients inquire with us. And we've had a couple of clients who have found us this way. One of our first jobs was a little renovation and addition in the east end of the city, which came to us as a referral from the lawyer who drafted our partnership agreement. But it has been, for the most part, referrals from people that we had worked with in previous lives, from builders and contractors that were resulting in real projects for us. For example, our first new build house came to us as a referral from a mechanical consultant that we had worked with in the past. And other projects came to us from people we knew at other firms. Meg Graham at Supercool has very kindly referred us to clients who have come to them when their firm is too busy to take on new work. And now we have just barely been around long enough that our earliest clients are now starting to refer us as well, resulting in a whole new source of potential work for us. And Joe will get into some of our projects a little later. So we've realized quite quickly that to bring in projects, you don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. You just need to be good people to work with and to do good work. And this has become our mantra. Though I'm sure Sarah would like to add a third objective, and that is to run a successful business as well. And she'll be taking over from here.
Okay, thank you, Andrea, and a big thank you to all of you for coming out to listen to the four of us this evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the only non-architect partner out of the four of us. Usually when I mention I'm a partner in an architecture practice, everybody is super excited until I say that I'm just the business manager, and quickly they become very disinterested. But I'm hoping that the reverse is true, and that in a room full of what I'm assuming is mostly architects tonight, what I'm about to say about our business strategy and financial management might be a bit more interesting to you. Fingers crossed. I'm assuming there might be a few of you in the audience thinking of starting your own practice. And so I thought it would be helpful to chat a bit about what we've experienced so far. This is insight that we would have liked to have had 5 years ago when we were starting out. As unfortunately, there's no website out there on how to start an architecture practice in Ontario, as much as I might have Googled that 5 years ago. So let's start at the very beginning. One of the very first business decisions we had to make was how to set up the structure of our practice. Being 4 equal partners, as well as being in the unique situation of being 2 married couples, we have quite the detailed partnership agreement, as I'm sure you can imagine. It took several hours in our lawyer's office, as well as quite a large bill during our first month of operations, to settle out the details and finally get our business incorporated. It took quite a while to recuperate from that bill. In fact, I still think we might be paying it off. As you all know, architects sadly do not charge the same rates as lawyers. But it has given us peace of mind that our company was set up properly. So blackLAB is comprised of 3 A's and a B. I'm the B. From our very first discussion, we decided to set up our practice as 4 equal partners, as Andrea mentioned, all of us having an equal say in our strategy and how we see this firm as being run successfully, a decision that I think has boded well for us over the past few years. As Andrea mentioned, we all have differing strengths, which we have come to utilize at different times over our existence. So the first thing we needed to do once we had registered our corporation and got our certificate of practice from the OAA, I decided to take a course that was offered through the Canada Revenue Agency, as we needed to start taking care of business. So at the CRA course for the day, we got tips on HST, record keeping, and other day-to-day dealings. This was not the most exciting 8 hours I've ever spent in my life, but it was very useful. None of us have ever run our own business before, let alone start one from scratch. I feel that it's my job to let the architects focus solely on the architecture by not having them worry about getting paid or worry about all the other fun responsibilities that come with running your business, like the insurance, the contracts, the HR, the accounting, the taxes. By my taking care of everything else and the smaller details of the firm, I feel that they can have more creativity. By not just having a bookkeeper, but a partner in charge of the business side of things who has real responsibility and a say in the decisions that we make, hopefully lets them relax a bit more. So as much as I'm involved in the strategy side of things, I also get to deal with all this fun stuff. Our invoices, ensuring our invoices are sent out each month. Our HST returns are filed quarterly, so we keep track of our taxes. I'm sure Andrea, Tony, and Joe dread each month when I come around to each other's desks to chat about what I can bill. but we all understand the importance of doing so. So I would encourage anybody out there to take a business course, learn how to read a balance sheet, a statement of cash flows, so you don't have to rely on your accountants for all this information. I'm in the fortunate position that this is what I studied at university, and I happen to like numbers, but I still found the CRA course very useful. And on a side, I noticed on the OAA website that they are offering a course now on starting your own practice, so might be of some interest to some of you out there. So even though we didn't have much work at the start, we did structure our office systems, our accounting software to be well organized right off the bat. Most of our original processes have not changed. Our accounting software has changed from desktop to online purely to save us time, but other than that, not much else. Our office was set up to be flexible from the start. We use cell phones and not a landline. We have a remote server so we can work from home when we need to. It's basically just us and our laptops and cell phones. There's no phone, there's no fax, there's no secretary. But again, we tried to set up to be successful from the start and put in processes that could evolve as our firm grew. I feel that I'm in the very fortunate position to be able to work with 3 people who are very good at what they do. I trust their work explicitly, and I feel that by them trusting me and knowing that the bills are being paid and that we are charging enough, I allow them to continue to be as creative and focused on their job as they should be. At the same time, we do like to have big picture meetings from time to time to discuss our financial situation and our strategies moving forward. It's hard to do this, and we ourselves should probably do this more, and not just when our annual statements come out each year. But as everyone is so busy just maintaining what needs to be done on projects on a day-to-day basis. But it's so important to make the time to do so. As much as I'm in charge of the financial side of the business, it's imperative for the others to be aware as well. In fact, in preparing what we are going to say tonight got me thinking that now that we're 5 years in, the changes we should be implementing and discussions we should be having moving forward. Time for another meeting. Of course, although our main goal is creating spaces that people love to live in and being good people to work with, at the outset, my goal as manager was obviously to ultimately build a firm that was profitable. Firstly, we try to keep our overhead costs as low as possible from the beginning. As Andrea mentioned, we built the space ourselves, which was financially the best decision for us at the time, and also kept everyone busy while looking for work. All in all, it was a good and lucky business decision to set up in the building and the up-and-coming neighborhood that we did, and we haven't outgrown the space yet, although our rent has definitely increased. I know that some people may believe that by making money as artists, you are selling out. I don't believe this. I feel that the fact that our firm is now somewhat successful financially means that Andrea, Tony, and Joe are able to try the experimental projects and be involved in the installations that don't necessarily earn a lot of money, but are important artistically, and at the same time fun to do. I also think it's good for our company morale to do these installations and exhibits that Tony's going to speak about in a little bit. It's nice to have a break once in a while from our day-to-day routine and change it up a bit. Although we don't usually make as much money during the month or so over installations, sometimes not much money at all. It's fun, gives our energy a boost, and revives us, and allows us to recover the money over the next quarter or so. We were very fortunate at the beginning of our practice to have received a loan at the very start. This guaranteed that we had a paycheck coming in every 2 weeks, especially as we all had families and other fiscal responsibilities. Though it took us a while to get to the point where we were consistently making money each month, as you can see, and had paid back our loan in full. At first, of course, our main challenge was finding clients, any clients who would take a chance on a new company. And we have been very fortunate to have had many great clients at the beginning and in the years since. In fact, we have been lucky to have repeat clients and also those who have passed our name along to family and friends. Word of mouth has been so important for our marketing. One thing that has remained consistent, though, since the beginning is that we have tried to keep our fee structure as simple and as straightforward for our clients as possible. We predominantly operate under a flat fee proposal, which we feel gives a sense of security to our clients. And while our fees have luckily increased since the beginning, for the most part, the structure of these proposals have not. We have learned a few things, though, and we know we still have so much to learn. One of the things we have learned is that we now do not negotiate on our fees. We do offer our clients a few options for levels of service that, so that they can choose how much they want to spend, but we do not haggle over our basic fee. Luckily, we are able to be a bit choosier on our clients now and can kind of ignore those who are raising red flags from the beginning. And we have clients who are willing to pay for our work. We charge what we charge, and I feel that it's very fair and offers good value to our clients. As an outsider, a non-architect, I believe I can hopefully say this to you. Architects deserve to be paid well, not only for the years of education that are required. I know this firsthand. Joe and I met when he was in his first year of university, so I lived through how many hours you all spend in that studio, but also for the dedication you show to your profession. I believe that architecture is not only a career, but a passion. Most of you become immersed in this passion. The trips you plan are based on the architecture. The museums you visit, the books you read are inspired by this career. Joe and I have been lucky enough to visit many great cities, and while we have hundreds of photos of buildings, we maybe have one or two of us. So my point is that this job for many of you is not just a job, not just a career, but a lifestyle, and you deserve to be financially rewarded for this. And my goal is that Andrea, Tony, and Joe can be rewarded for this dedication as well. In terms of fees, of course, I would like ours to increase still. They are not yet where I would like them to be, and 5 years in, we still have a ways to go. As you can see on one of our previous slides, there's been some ups and downs for us, and although we are very lucky to be trending in the right direction, with our expenses remaining fairly constant and our sales increasing each year. One of the challenges of my job is to set fees that are fair for both clients and architects. It has taken a lot of tracking of hours over the past few years to get to the point where we can ensure that, for the most part, the enormous amount of hours that go into each project are adequately budgeted for at the beginning of the project. Hourly billing is always an option for us as well. However, we do prefer to stay away from this, as we found that it can invite a lot of questions from clients regarding hours spent on schematic design and other design tasks, and it's definitely more of a hassle. Of course, people are not required to use a licensed architect for the residential work that we predominantly do. So from the very beginning, we've had to have a strong position that we needed to present to clients on the value of using a licensed architect. Oh, shoot, sorry. Luckily, this just seemed to have gotten easier for us over time. Our other challenge is making sure we get paid and paid on time. Many clients are great, others not so much. It's a difficult profession as we rely so much on referrals and word of mouth. And while we do not want to be taken advantage of, it's a fine line between politely reminding clients that money is owned and them getting upset. Luckily for Andrea, Tony, and Joe, they do not have to deal with this. I get to always be the bad cop in these situations while they remain the good cops. Of course, as business owners, we are able to set our rates and hopefully reap many of the rewards. To balance this, there is the obvious risk of downturns, and for that we have established a rainy day fund, which of course will evolve as our business grows and changes, especially because of the difficulty in forecasting in residential architecture, another big challenge for us. Since the beginning, I have consistently tried to forecast our months and years ahead based on the projects we have at that time. Every time I fail. Residential architecture clients are tricky. Many clients say at the beginning that they will make decisions quickly and that they want their project to be built starting in the spring. And then they do not decide quickly or change their mind. Other clients of ours sadly have become ill or their financial situations have drastically changed, and the project has needed to pause or become postponed. I still haven't figured out the best way to forecast yet, and hopefully we will soon. Also, even though we primarily focus on residential works, I do feel it's a good strategy for us to participate in a few non-residential projects for our portfolio as well. You never know what the future and the economy will hold, so I think it's best to have a few ideas in your back pocket as well. Many people talk about the risk to starting your own business, and while there are many and they are super scary, I think it's important to focus on the positive. When we started, Andrea and Tony had 2 young children, and Joe and I had an 11-month-old baby. We are lucky enough to have great kids who don't mind eating pizza and watching movies. They're so cute. While their parents build a golf tee wall, or who don't mind visiting construction sites. 10 months into starting the business, I became pregnant with twins. In hindsight, probably not the greatest of timing when you have a new company. But the benefits of having your own business and supportive partners are that you don't have to be in the office from 9 to 5. In fact, for the first year of my daughter's lives, I barely made it into the office at all. I have great partners who happily held lunchtime meetings at my house, and while Andrea, Tony, and Joe do have to meet clients during the evenings and on weekends, we are lucky enough as business owners to be able to take time off during the week to take our kids to sports activities or volunteer on their school trips. We don't have to ask each other's permission to do so, and this comes back to trust as well. We trust each other that the work that needs to get done will get done. You don't need to be in the office from 9 to 5 to do this, especially for me, who only works part-time. It also helps that we designed our office to be flexible from the start. And as much as our office is flexible, our strategy needs to be flexible and fluid as well. It's going to be interesting to see where we are in a further 5 years, and we're going to try and remain as open and to change as possible. So we had a few final tips basically to summarize what I've been saying for those of you maybe interested in starting a practice. So my number one would be choose your partners wisely. Choose partners who you trust and who have differing strengths, and learn from each other's strengths. Number two, start as you mean to go on. Set up as you want to succeed. Put your partnership, corporate documents, accounting in place right from the start, even before you have any projects. Number three, be flexible and willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. I'm sure at this point of their career, Andrea, Tony, and Joe didn't think they'd still be assembling and stapling presentation documents. I didn't get a master's degree to be reconciling visa statements, but we do these tasks quickly, and again, do whatever it takes to get it done. Number four, Andrea was talking about the importance that our networks have been to us over the past 5 years. Five would be communicate, have those meetings, have those discussions with your partners on a regular basis. And finally, and important, be constantly open to learning and open to change. A few things have changed for us in the past few years. Construction administration, which we didn't have any fees at the beginning, is now a huge earner for us. We're unsure what the future will hold. Are we going to take on bigger projects, fewer projects, hire staff? Right now we are small by design, and we just have these three lovely architects taking on the many roles. We believe that clients like the fact that we don't have staff right now, but we are having a constant conversation about this and how we should grow. It's a bit of a conundrum for us right now. Approximately 15 years ago, Joe came back to our apartment in Manchester from a lecture he attended while at the Manchester School of Architecture. It was held by a partner in an architecture firm who ran the business side of things. This was unusual for him to attend a lecture by a non-architect. I remember Joe telling me that I should have been there and that it stressed the importance of having somebody with business acumen run a firm. Not just a bookkeeper, but someone who has an actual say in the running of the company and the strategic decisions that need to be made. I kept the notes from that lecture, and they moved with us from Manchester back to Toronto. And then I looked at them when we started the firm, a few years in, and then again when I was preparing what I was going to speak about tonight. It was basic input about all the non-architecture responsibilities that are so key to a firm being successful. The management of people, the marketing strategies, and of course, fees. 5 years in, we still have so much to learn about running this business. We've made a few mistakes along the way and are still learning, and we're sure it will continue to evolve and change moving forwards. I feel so fortunate that I love my job and I'm able to be in the position I am in to help take some of the pressure off Andrea, Tony, and Joe so that they can design some of the great projects that Joe is going to be speaking about next. And on that note, thank you, and on to the fun stuff.
Thanks, Sarah. As you can imagine, when we first began, we had little to no work. Who knows how many leads we took more seriously than we should have, and how many failed proposals we wrote, but desperate times called for desperate measures. It was a stressful few months worrying that real projects might not come about. We had a few things occupying our time, mainly building our office in conjunction with calling anyone and everyone we knew in the hope of finding a lead, along with redesigning toilet layouts in our office building for our landlord who took pity on us. It was scary and at times quite overwhelming. Our first few projects came through chance. We were fortunate to have our lawyer recommend us to his neighbor, which resulted in this third-floor bathroom renovation. As it turned out, the client had lived in Manchester when I was studying architecture there a number of years ago, and it seemed like fate that we'd been brought together. We'd always thought this common ground was the reason they committed to working with us, although as Sarah grimaces, it was likely more related to the quite enticing fees at the time. As Andrea noted, we were also very reliant at the time on consultants and contractors from our previous work in the residential field to make recommendations to clients of theirs. Many of our earlier projects came about this way, and in fact, we've also had several more recent clients connect through this route. This chalet located near Ravenna came through one of those contractors.
and one we've now built several homes with. We're incredibly grateful that he and so many others reached out to help us establish a footing. This particular home was unfortunately put on hold later in the design process, but served as a great experience and allowed us to spread our wings to the Collingwood area, where we've enjoyed a great success since. This custom residence was one that took some time to get going. A contractor we knew well had a client who was looking for an architect, and so he generously introduced them to us. And after a little back and forth, they finally committed to using us. It was likely a huge leap of faith, much like the commitment made by so many of the clients in the early days. It was a real milestone event for us to win the project, as it was likely the first time we actually charged something reasonable. Other relations that we had also looked out for us. In this instance, good friends of ours who I designed a residence for a number of years ago made a recommendation to a friend of theirs to contact us regarding severing a downtown lot and building a modest new build home. It was one of our longest running projects, beginning back in 2012 and just now entering construction. It had a host of complications, including dealing with the C of A several times and even a trip to OMB. But finally, we're now able to see our efforts revealed as renderings become a reality. It, like many others, taught us to remain patient and to never give up on a project, no matter how complex things get. So there are a few lessons we've learned along the way, perhaps too many to be mentioned. One of those being that in the early days, you'll do just about anything you can for work. The fee for the design of this custom home was partly based on real money exchanging hands, and partly based on the understanding that the owner would promote us in a magazine that he published quarterly. He followed through by allowing us to advertise in several issues, but ultimately we struck this down as a bit of a miss, as nothing ever came out of the advertising, and likely we plowed many more hours into than we ever billed for. At one point in time, we ventured out into designing custom homes for a developer. The project was quite different from all of our other experiences, as we were retained to design several house types, providing the client with marketing material to sell the homes in the earlier days, and issuing permits and detailed packages for units as they've sold since. We were given some freedom with the designs, but perhaps not as much as we would have liked, which is why I've only included this one image. Joking apart, the project was a real learning curve for us. Writing a fee proposal that needed to encompass multiple years of work was incredibly challenging. More recent invoices issued for this project serve as a friendly reminder that we had in the past fallen into the trap of undervaluing our services by not charging what we should have. We've been blessed to work with many other interesting people along the way, with other early notables including designing an addition for a surveyor we'd previously worked alongside, designing countless renovations for clients that, due to budget constraints, inserted themselves into the role of the builder, as well as renovating our own homes, partly out of necessity and partly to bulk up our portfolio material. For the most part, things have gone well, although as you can imagine, the odd project has threatened to go sideways when experimenting with a contractor for the first time, or through the odd unexpected event arising. But overall, we've always managed to get things back on track. These earlier projects, all in their own way, have tested us. Some have been more profitable than others, and some more exciting than others. What they've done is allow us to remain grounded, to mature, and keep learning. Working through them has enabled us to build a portfolio that now attracts clients who have bigger budgets, which result in bigger fees and ultimately greater opportunities. Although I could go on for longer discussing a broader selection of projects that share some similar learning experiences, I wanted to instead take a step back and look at a couple of projects that were key to us and the development of blackLAB. Whilst we know that our clients enjoy their homes as a place to live in, and the audience, hopefully, enjoy what's captured on film, when we're all said and done, to us the most important aspect of what we do, and something that we've refined over time, is our process. It is this that we believe really attracts our clients. I'm sure we all have a different understanding of what work is. For my kids, it either involves going to class to learn to read and write, or learning how to construct, build, or draw something at home. To most of you, it likely involves interacting with other professionals and applying your own skill set to a given situation. It's a little different to each one of us. No matter what our idea of work is, behind it lies a process, a unique perspective on how we should approach a situation, a way to differentiate ourselves from the crowd. The following are 3 milestone projects that helped us establish how we wanted or needed to work. They forced us to remain flexible and enabled us to begin to differentiate ourselves from other firms through experimenting with our process. This particular project is a great example of our early days when we'd literally worked for next to nothing to build a portfolio, a common theme to much of what I'm talking about. The fee associated was not terribly significant, but given that it was our first opportunity to work on a new build home under blackLAB's name, we were willing to do almost anything for the project. The client was a similar age to us. And specialized in running startup businesses, which of course drew parallels with our situation as a newly formed practice, and likely helped them commit to working alongside us. He was adamant that his vision of a courtyard home that sprawled the landscape and nestled seamlessly into its surroundings alongside the nearby river would fit well with his initial budget. We were less than convinced. But like many strong-minded clients, he ensured that the courtyard layout, despite our concerns and suggestions that he should consider a more compact layout, would come to fruition. No matter whether it was the budget, design, or simply the overwhelming scale of the build that challenged him, it was fair to say the client remained incredibly enthusiastic about the home, as well as our involvement. He was someone who wouldn't for a second compromise on his vision, which in many ways should be applauded. Anyway, we had at this juncture worked on a few smaller renovations, but nothing of this scale under blackLAB, and so naturally all three of us wanted to be involved. And so as the project got underway, we ensured that we each fully immersed ourselves in the design. To this end, we decided to focus our efforts on developing a series of sketch layouts that we could share internally with one another for group discussion. We would take advantage of each other's perspective on the sketch layouts by developing each scheme further with their thoughts of others now available. What we came to realize quite quickly was that we all had a slightly different understanding of what our clients' wants and needs were, and that we could add so much more to our ideas by working together. We would each have the opportunity to develop our own basic scheme, which naturally led to a broad selection of ideas. But above and beyond this, we would also be able to incorporate ideas that none of us would have arrived at if we'd simply worked in isolation. This became a natural selling point on future pitches, as we would often reference that clients were hiring 3 principal architects for the price of 1. Rather than one of us arriving at 3 quite similar schemes for review, our clients would be able to review 3 completely unique perspectives. So over the course of the next few meetings, we found that we were able to effectively refine initial ideas into more concrete solutions. Aside from the designs themselves, part of this collaborative process naturally led us to all meeting with the client and being copied on all general correspondence, which gave them great confidence that we were all completely focused on the project. As newer projects came about during the later stages of design, we found that there came a point where we weren't all needed. And so one of us remained in control, dealing with the finer details and as the project progressed towards permit and construction. As things moved into construction, we began to realize the client was keen to take the reins. We had our hesitations as it was such a large and complex build. However, he insisted he was able to execute on his own, and so we were advised that contract admin services were not needed. The combination of no formal contractor in tandem with no architectural input during construction was another facet of our process that we would later consider evolving, and something I'll touch upon shortly. As with so many projects, some creative license was taken by the client when addressing the fine and finished details, often deviating from the more flexible details within the drawings. But as we've come to realize over time, this is in fact something we love and appreciate. As Sarah noted, we always offer our clients the flexibility to choose our level of involvement, which can result in being retained to advise and specify the inner workings of a home, which of course we love. However, this isn't always the case, and this one wasn't any different. During the later stages of the aforementioned project, we were approached by a contact we had from a previous life. He, his wife, and 2 kids had heard that we were up and running our own firm, and as someone who knew our previous work, they were keen to retain us for the design of their home. The project started off with a classic carrot being dangled in front of our noses. We were to renovate a small coach house on their 50-acre property, and with limited funds available to them, we would agree to complete the project at a very small fee, knowing that once underway, we would be retained to then focus on their main house. At this very naive time in our lives, we jumped at what seemed like a wonderful opportunity. We applied the same logic of collaborating with one another on the project through the early design phase. We adapted the approach slightly as the project was out of town and at the outset remained quite small. As a practice made up of 2 married couples, we knew we had some limiting factors, one of which was that both halves of one couple couldn't easily be out of town at the same time. And so Tony and I focused on meeting the client on site, with Andrea collaborating with us in the office, which enabled the 3 of us to still meet internally and benefit from one another's input. This setup made great sense on a project that was seemingly much simpler, whilst all the while retaining this collaborative approach that we'd grown to enjoy. What differed on this project and made us realize that every project truly is unique was the client's role. He was a craftsman in his own right. He designed and built furnishings in wood and metal, and so he had a strong perspective on the design. Our meetings in the initial stages were much more hands-on. He would provide sketches and diagrams rather than written feedback. In many ways, he became a 4th member of our design team. This was something quite unexpected and forced us to adapt our process to be a little more organic, with less focus on presenting ideas as part of a sales pitch and more focus on a working meeting setup. It was this project that helped us realize that clients might benefit from a more collaborative approach. We've since made efforts to make our meetings less formal and to pull out trace paper and invite them to provide more feedback. Traveling with our laptops and 3D models in hand enables us to both take more typical notes, but also allows us to make on-the-fly changes to our designs in front of our clients. The construction process was again a learning curve for everyone. The client literally built the home himself. He not only project managed, but poured months of his own time into physically constructing the home. He hired framers and foundation specialists among very few other trades, but insisted on completing so much of the build himself. If you were to stop by the project today, you'd no doubt see him slaving away on some of the finer finish details within the home. We experimented with all kinds of exciting new ideas, including detailing and implementing board form concrete exterior walls to give the home a very unique aesthetic. Many of these details were figured out on site using materials we had on hand and somewhat on the fly. It wasn't uncommon to arrive on site for a meeting to have the client change things up. One larger scale change came in the form of amending the design to include an addition of 4 times its current size. The client, several months into the build, had scratched the idea of a new build main residence in favor of turning his renovation into their longer-term home. You can see through this video how this amendment was pretty significant and how the home evolved quite dramatically since our initial sketches. These finished photos go some way to expressing the client's overall vision. You can see what effect cladding the exterior with an unexpected delivery of reclaimed barn board does, as well as the beauty that board form concrete can bring to the design when mixed with robust Corten steel panels. You can also see wires still dangling from walls and unfinished soffits waiting their finish. This home is as eclectic as they come, but it works and we love it. In the end, this all again led us to believe that the process of design doesn't stop after the drawings are issued, but instead our involvement during construction could really benefit a project. And so on to the case study 3. In mid-2015, a couple in Toronto approached us to renovate their home. They were well-educated people who knew they needed professional input throughout the project's entire process. They had a healthy budget and a wish to do the project the right way. We'd been fortunate enough to work on several other similar projects leading up to this one, where we were working with larger budgets, larger fees, and clients that knew the importance of everyone's role. Whilst the previous projects I touched upon offered us the opportunity to develop our process and find a groove in the earlier days, this was perhaps a good example of how some of our more recent projects and processes were still evolving. We took advantage of the collaborative efforts of our own blackLAB team, all being involved in the early design process, as we worked through a series of layout options, with 2 of us meeting the client and 1 providing input behind the scenes. Now we were busier, this of course was a logical step, as the project's scale didn't necessitate all 3 of us being in every meeting, but it gave balance to our ideas behind the scenes. Although it's worth noting that on larger scale new build homes, we do continue to all be involved in the early meetings. Unlike the 2 aforementioned projects, and similar to the one that sat in between, we had an actual contract to provide budgets during schematic design, so we could establish whether the scope we were proposing was in fact viable. This was something we had come to realize on our projects helped the process a great deal. At one point leading up to the budget review, we proposed that the client consider a new build home, as seen on the right side of the slide, as the renovation had become so extensive. We were concerned that the budget feedback might lead them to reconsider this earlier conversation. However, they remained firmly focused on the renovation as they reaffirmed their love for the existing home's exterior. As with the other two case studies, there eventually came a point where one of us led the way and the finer details began to be refined. Again, we had learned it wasn't A, sustainable to be all involved in every facet of every project, and B, logical to include all three of us in these later design stages. We also came to the agreement that whilst we had benefited greatly from having the contractor involved in the early design phase to work through preliminary budgets, the project would perhaps benefit from inserting us into the construction of the home on a more regular basis. The clients agreed, and so we would meet weekly on site, working through all kinds of details, many of which were born out of the complexity of a full gut renovation and its inevitable need for adjustments to be made, or simply to provide clarification to the contractor. We would also use this time to ensure our client who wanted our input throughout, ensure that our client who wanted our input throughout were at ease, and the finish and the finer details were seen through as from what we'd previously proposed. Sorry, I deviated a little bit. We believed by extending ourselves beyond the design process and also by allowing the contractor to be inserted into the earlier part of the project, in conjunction with our own internal collaborative efforts and those of outside consultants, that we can take advantage of one another's skill sets to their fullest. I believe that both Claudio and, I'm sorry for mentioning your names, Claudio and Doriana are both here tonight, and given that we're still speaking, as well as being fortunate enough to enjoy time in one another's company since the project ended, we hope in their eyes, as well as our other clients' eyes, that our 5.5-year journey to refine this process is proving effective. So in summary, the clients in these three case studies, like many others, are all quite different, and with them, they have brought a diverse selection of projects that have afforded us the opportunity to adapt and evolve, for which we're incredibly grateful. It now gives me great pleasure and relief to pass the baton on to Tony, who will walk you through our extracurricular work.
So, thanks, Joe. Being small and flexible, those are two characteristics that are ingrained in our office structure. This allows us to shift our attention and work intensely on all different sorts of projects when an opportunity arises. Extracurricular isn't the main focus of what we do. We still have to pay the bills, as Sarah always reminds us, but a variety of challenge keeps things fresh and interesting. These projects are often installations, but can also involve outreach about design. Joe has found a receptive audience among kindergarten students, and he has done a few lectures now about what it's like to be an architect. Like other aspects of our firm, these projects have unfolded along a path, starting at the beginning with our office space. The large blank wall at our office became a great place to explore a piece of art at the scale of architecture. And we've all talked about the role the office space plays in our story, but I'm going to address some of the challenges of that build. We love mosaics and pixelated images. It seems to be a natural intersection of art and architecture and the organic and digital. This is the aerial photo we converted into a mosaic for that wall. We had done some earlier experiments with wall-sized art. This here is a kitchen backsplash mosaic created by individually masking and painting 1 by 1 pixels, and it turned out to be incredibly time-consuming. Now, the wall at our office is about 4 times that size, so the challenge was to create something effective without it being quite so painstaking. Our solution was to cover the wall with pegboard, which creates a natural grid and is low cost, and hammer golf tees into the holes. And it's surprising how cheap bulk golf tees are. Working from small printed maps, we filled in small sections of the grid with different colored tees. We thought we were doing our fellow tenants in the building a favor by coming in early in the morning to bang on the wall endlessly, but it turned out that the old building also had residential tenants as well as business. Suffice to say, we met a lot of neighbors during this time. The entire process took about 4 months. This was early days at blackLAB, and as we've all said, we had very few paying projects. The mosaic uses 43,000 golf tees, and it now forms a backdrop to our workspace. Other than being much slower than we predicted, it was successful in functioning at a large scale and being very inexpensive to make. And as Andrea mentioned, it was a statement of who our firm was at a time when we had no projects. So there's definitely a link from the golf tee mosaic to being asked to participate in the special exhibit at the 2013 Interior Design Show. We were quite grateful for the opportunity early in the life of the firm. The overall exhibit asked 4 different designers to occupy a shipping container and explore the question of how do you work. As Andrea mentioned, the firms included Samar, Heather Doubledam's office, and Igloo Design. So we thought we would continue the exploration of large-scale mosaics and look at the fundamental elements that a design firm works with. We eventually settled on color because at a basic level, it's a tool at your disposal when designing. This shows a color gradient converted into pixels, and we rendered the gradient with pencil crayons, though not with drawing by pushing them into holes. Pencil crayons, again, being another tool of design. Our challenge was to make something large and low cost, like the golf tee mosaic, but time was much shorter, both as far as creating the mosaic and installing it at the show. So what we did was turn the mosaic into modular panels that were transportable and also didn't require months of sitting on a scaffold with a hammer. Put together, the colored pencils added a lot of depth and some really interesting visual effects to the mosaic. The assembled pencil wall sat at the back of our installation. In front, we created an open and flexible workspace. A table, like the one at our office, is, in our minds, a fundamental part of design work. We feel that design should always step back and support the activities that it encourages. On the white surface of the table, we created a video projection that showed how a table works as a gathering place, as a workplace, a collaborative space, and a play space. Over the course of 4 days at the show, we really made a connection to the other designers. We've mentioned Joel Loblaw, who had been brought in to tie the 4 exhibit spaces together. He used a lot of plant material in the connecting spaces, and we felt that was a brilliant move as it helped make 4 grueling days of standing at the show much more livable. One footnote is that we kept the mosaic after the show, and eventually we sold it to an apartment building development in New York. We learned the logistics of packaging and shipping a large art piece across the border, and that was quite interesting. But now the pencils sit in a shared lounge space at that building. The next year, the IDS team asked us to help create an overall space for a special exhibit. The idea was similar, 4 spaces for different designers to explore a common theme. We went back to our normal design process for any client and pitched 3 different ideas for the space, including a sinuous arrangement of flowing spaces and ideas for modular units for the designers to occupy. The scheme that won out was this one, of 4 similar shells tied together with a folding roof plane. And here's a shot from the outside after construction at the show floor. So this same show presented another little opportunity that we turned into a side project that we called the origami bench. The design for the overall space was always intended to have a seating and gathering spot at the center. We had learned from the prior year when we were exhibitors that a bit of comfort goes a long way at the show. However, that bench was cut from the budget. With about 2 weeks to go before the show, we began to think that a bench could be something we could contribute to the space. And this is, again, where being a small and flexible firm and being able to shift focus really helped us with this project. On a Friday afternoon, we had a quick design charrette in the office and came up with a few ways to create folding forms with faceted panels, something that would echo the overall look of the space. Fortunately, the simpler of those 2 schemes won out, considering the deadline. And after a full-scale mock-up in cardboard that same afternoon, we cut the pieces from 1-inch plywood. We had to work quickly using simple tools due to the deadline. The upper surface was finished in low-cost plastic laminate, and the legs were made from folded tubular steel. The facets themselves were connected with piano hinges. And this solved the connection geometry while adding a level of detail. We feel it almost looked like piping in upholstery. The benches were planned as 2 with integral side tables that would nestle. This is them at the show. But we also designed them to fit our office after the show. So those methods we explored in the bench became another side project that we investigated in more detail in what we called the origami chair. Folding furniture is nothing new, but we thought we would investigate how that folding action can inform furniture for small spaces. We used paper mock-ups to gain an understanding of how to balance foldability with form and comfort. The chair uses a shell of plywood facets. Piano hinges again became the connection detail, and the inherent freedom of motion lent itself well to the folding action of the shell. Working with facets as opposed to bent plywood meant that the shell was something we could fabricate ourselves. That shell unfolds and sits on a base made of steel rod. The base isn't rigid, meaning that the hinges and facets are allowed to move and flex to suit the person sitting in the chair. Each steel part in the base is only bent in one plane. That's to say it lies flat. And this is a set of legs during fabrication. And this is the chair packed for shipping. And I would say that the experience of shipping an extremely bulky and fragile pencil mosaic definitely informed the thinking behind the chair. We exhibited the chair and a couple similar pieces at the interior design show as part of the Studio North section. This past year, we were asked by the interior design show if we were interested in creating an exhibit space for Ontario Wood. And you can see that IDS has been central to a lot of our story, proof that your networks are important, and that if you're good to your friends, they will be good back to you. Ontario Wood is a program that promotes locally sourced wood products, as well as featuring makers and craftspeople. The program for the exhibit space was to create a place for 15 to 20 works by makers who work under that program. But again, the timeline was very short. We only had a few weeks until the show was to be constructed. So before committing, we did this quick design study as a way of considering whether we thought it was even feasible to create a large space, about 1,700 square feet on a low budget. The thought was to create various size boxes and stack them, and that we would use Ontario-sourced construction-grade plywood. So we saw some potential in the sketch, and we said yes. But there turned out to be one big problem with that scheme, is that there are no Ontario manufacturers producing exterior sheathing, something that we needed as far as low-cost materials. And to be part of the story of the space, everything absolutely needed to be built from materials that came from Ontario. There are, however, sawmills in Ontario producing construction lumber. So we shifted gears and looked at the potential for creating interesting walls by stacking 2x6s. What really helped us find a balance between spatial interest and inherent stability was playing with strips of wood at a small scale. The method we settled on was a stack of 2x6 that combined simple rotation with a linear offset as the wall transitions from its base to its top. We designed the overall space as a repetition of 4 of those modular shells, and this created a variety of places within the overall exhibit, meaning that we could curate and display all sorts of different pieces, including small pieces, lighting, floor-standing furniture, and wall-hanging art. So the IDS show only allows about 4 days for construction, from the trucks arriving at the floor to installing the display pieces. And while it's easy to array and rotate elements in a 3D model, we were worried about the time involved in creating the real thing. Sitting down and having a collaboration meeting with the construction crew at an early stage was critical. One of the crew suggested full-size templates that establish the curve that each 2x6 bumps up against as it goes up the stack. So our planned method came to include a combination of pipes at the rotation points and freestanding curves. We worked with Moses structural engineers who looked at the overall stability, i.e. safety, and the fastening details. To keep things moving fast during construction, we came up with a detail for stacking a batch of the 2x6s, kind of dry stacking them, and then screwing them together from the outside. And they also consulted on how much we could drill and screw the pieces of 2x6 without compromising the future usability. It became critical to us that the material have a future life after the show, and the majority of the materials were donated to Habitat for Humanity. So we ordered an extremely large volume of wood and had it delivered to the office, and we set to work on as much fabrication we could do before the show. We also built one of the shells in a temporary borrowed space to get a sense of the time involved and the reality of moving from little sticks on your desk to a shell that's 25 feet long and 8 feet high. At the show, the planning, we felt, really played off. With a full crew helping out, the pieces prefabricated and the templates in place, we had the basics of the space constructed in about 2 days. So we really feel that the finished space turned out well. The warmth of the raw wood created a sense of enclosure and oasis within the show. It's important to state how much we needed to draw on our network of suppliers, builders, and consultants to pull this off on a tiny budget. And we're still grateful for their help in acquiring materials, lighting, and even large woodblock mosaic that Brothers Dressler created for the center of the space. Most recently, we created a little installation for the OAA Move Party last month, and it was a kind of a fun exercise for us. We've always been intrigued with the glass block wall at our office and how it can pixelate light and shadow when the conditions are right. And this is despite being material that's kind of fallen out of favor with designers. We thought we would try something similar with a projection wall that would create a shifting mosaic of lighted pixels. We wanted to make something that was effective and a bit of fun because it was a party. So we did a small-scale study using trace paper and using our office projector. It seemed like there was a bit of promise in the idea. At the space at the OAA building, we showed up with a pre-cut structure that dropped together, and then we covered both sides of the wall with mylar skins. What was interesting, we thought at least, was how well the wall would render the interaction of shadows with video and really create a moving and shifting mosaic. So you may ask, and certainly we do, what we learn from these projects and experiments, as in what's their value, as we are, after all, running a business. Sarah does tend to remind us that the extracurricular work tends to impact our earnings. At a basic level, this kind of work keeps things fresh and challenges us to look at design in different ways. No matter what we are designing, whether a house or a mosaic, the fundamentals of approaching the problem remain the same. So here are a couple of things we've learned that cross over between these kind of fun extracurricular projects and our paying work. We've come to realize that any successful project requires stepping back and understanding the basic questions that are fundamental and that the design needs to answer. That's to say that a livable space, we've come to realize, is more about light and connections rather than specific fixtures and finishes. Also, in the installations we've worked on, we came to realize that the problem was always about creating an impact and being effective at a large scale with low cost. And we've learned to always be building on what we've learned from previous projects. Process, as Joe mentions, is something that should always be evolving, whether figuring out how to make mosaics faster, how to stack 2x6s, how to write a proposal, or how to better guide a client through the process of designing and building a house. So I've been quite lucky in that I got to talk about all the fun work we do, but it's kind of payback as I try to bring this to a close in an intelligent-sounding way. It's a huge honor to be recognized as best emerging practice by the OAA, and we understand that for a young firm, the award is about trajectory rather than a body of work. It's our hope that we can continue to grow, to follow that trajectory, and that the work that we create has a place within the larger story of design in Canada. It's been a privilege to be given the stage to share our story tonight. Of all the things that our firm has taken on, as Sarah mentioned, hiring staff hasn't been one of them yet. Existing as the four of us right now is what works best for us, but that may change as we continue to evolve. Day to day, we get a lot of job applications, especially in the age of BCCing a resume to every firm in the city. And our advice to those people making those applications right now would be, don't work for us, but work against us. The way that the OAA and the other provincial associations have worked over the past decade to introduce the EXAC and push more interns to become registered, in our minds, means great things for architecture in Canada. These changes mean more firms and more architects collaborating and competing and exploring how this profession can work. We know that our story is only a tiny slice of a larger mesh of practices, architects, and design firms. Andrea, at the beginning, mentioned the extremely brief conversation we had with Donald Chong almost 5 years ago, but it's still resonating with us. And what was surprising was the density of advice he had in very few words. Along with the notion of firms growing from each other like sourdough, he also suggested or advised that if you're going to show up to do something, you have to try to knock it out of the park, even if you fail. While he was in that instance talking about exhibit design, it absolutely applies to thinking about how to build an architecture practice. After all, as architects, we all have the skills to design our own path, working with the right people, especially those who understand business, answering the important fundamental questions, and sticking to your core story while being open to evolution has worked well for us. It's not the only way or the best way to do things, but we hope that anybody here tonight can take away some aspects of our story, reinvent it, and build on it. So from the four of us, thank you.
So I think that was a brilliant presentation. It gave a really great overview of your entire practice, which is inspiring. We want to open up the floor. Oh, yes. We want to open up the floor to any questions that anyone might have for blackLAB. And I think there's a traveling mic around too somewhere at the back. Anyone? Or everybody just wants to go to the bar for a drink? Yeah, you guys are ready?
Question.
Any last takers? Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
If given any type of project, what would you want to work on? What kind of project would you like to work on? Like if it was an ideal project?
I guess there's maybe no ideal project out there. I think the satisfaction, hopefully it comes through the presentation for us, is that we've worked with so many different people on so many different projects, and I think as a collective, that's the most satisfying thing. I don't think any one of those projects is better than the other. We've had some incredibly frustrating clients to work with that have turned out to be wonderful people, and we've had great satisfaction working with them. But we've also, had things go the other way. So I don't think there's a right and wrong. I mean, I guess maybe in Sarah's eyes, the clients that pay us the most would probably be the ideal ones. But I think you can see from what a lot of Tony talked about, a lot of things we've done where we haven't charged anything or very little of being probably our most satisfying time spent doing non-architectural stuff. But yeah, I don't know if there's, unless you guys have a better answer. We love everything we do, I guess.
Maybe say that the best projects are one where we have a sense that clients really appreciate the role that design can play, and maybe that speaks to a larger hope that there's a better cultural appreciation for what architects do and what we can bring to a project.
What advice would you have for trying to find or seek out these great collaborators, be it engineers or craftspeople, trades?
I can use an I'll use an example from the beginning. Obviously, the three of them had worked with lots of engineers and contractors at their previous practice that continued in our new practice, but you went to a builders and trades event in Collingwood of all places, and that's where they started meeting other contractors and people who we've worked with in the past 5 years. So getting out there to different events with different contractors and engineers and all that stuff, and networking that way socially is maybe a good way to build it as well. But I don't know if you guys have anything to add.
I think it's funny. I guess as a client, you're looking for people to work with, to collaborate with. But I think people within the industry are constantly doing that as well. Like, we are constantly seeking out new people to work with. We mentioned a number of people in there, but there's an architect here tonight, Jim Campbell, that I've gotten to know briefly recently, and I didn't know him, but I met him through a client of ours, and so we ourselves as architects and designers and engineers are trying to do probably what a lot of our clients are doing, which is spreading our wings and going to events to meet people, and in the hope that we can work on more exciting things down the road. So just get out there, I guess, like Sarah said.
And maybe I would add that perhaps the most mileage we've gotten out of meeting with or knowing builders and trades is perhaps the idea that we don't really see ourselves as the top of the pyramid. We understand that we're good at what we do, but a plumber is great at what he does or she does. A builder is there as part of that relationship of architect, client, and builder. So being open and flexible, and as we often say, hopefully good to work with, being good to those people. They were, in the early stages, as we've mentioned, they were really happy to recommend us as nice people to work with.
Any more?
Hi, that's amazing work. I'm really inspired. I just wanted to know, when you get a project, how do you decide who's going to lead the job? And in the different phases of any one project, is it one consistent leader, or do you rotate the lead at the different stages of the project? How do you manage that?
Well, I guess what we do at the beginning of the process is to kind of go away and come up with a few designs on our own, and then we come together and have a look at them and have a little in-house critique, and then we decide on what we're going to present to the client, and then I feel like the client might make a connection with one of the schemes a bit more clearly, or a connection with one of us a bit more clearly. So that helps drive the kind of the direction that the project might take. Another factor might be, which one of us has more time on our hands to take on one of the projects.
Oh, down to the front. Mm-hmm. So I guess, as I'm speaking through things in the presentation, things, I guess, can take a slightly different context. I guess when I talk about like the contractor coming in earlier in the process, what we typically do, because we have learned that it's an awful lot to ask of a contractor to constantly be updating things, and we've had many instances where we've worked closely with some contractors and they've just not won a project. They've been pricing things for us 3 or 4 times, and you really feel like you're kind of leaning on them. So what we try to do is we kind of get them to come back with a very high-level budget. So they're not necessarily going out to all of their sub-consultants and getting a full breakdown. What they're doing is they're giving us some very high-level feedback, but it's enough feedback to get us in the ballpark. to understanding, is this a $500,000 renovation or is this an $800,000 renovation? And what we found is that high-level feedback is enough information to get our clients to be able to commit to the idea of working through the detailed drawings. But it's also not so much that you're asking the contractor to spend enormous amounts of time. So, in some instances on some projects, there's been a connection straight away with that contractor, with the client, and so we've just completely committed to moving ahead with them, and they've become part of that integral process of detailing things to suit them. In other instances, we haven't necessarily found that connection, but we've used their feedback to make a decision on whether we're adjusting the scheme and how we're moving ahead, and then maybe they've come back into the conversation later on and perhaps in some instances moved ahead with the project, in other instances not. But we do kind of balance that very carefully. We're careful not to take advantage of people, but we've been really fortunate to work with contractors that are eager to work on great projects with great clients. And I think that there's a willingness for them to invest in that process. We ourselves try and invest in the process where we can without, making money. I mean, we meet with a lot of people and take the time to kind of be thorough with people. And as a side note, what we've tried to do to help a lot of clients that inquire, because we more recently had a lot of inquiries, and they're not always projects that we can take on, is we've started doing consultations for people as well. So, we spend a bit of time with them, we sketch some ideas, and they can reach out to contractors and get some high-level pricing based on some loose ideas, but it gets them kind of off on the right foot, gives them some fundamental good design to sort of set a foundation, and they come back to us later if they want to, or they go and find a drafting service or someone to work with. But we're constantly trying to sort of help inform that process, make it a little easier for clients, but as I say, not take advantage of contractors, but work with them in a positive way.
Yeah, I guess you're quite right. We do try to, in the initial stages of a project, sit down with pens and trace paper. Maybe we've kind of given up a little bit in moving to the computer quite early on in the process, but as far as drawing, whether it's using a pen or using a mouse, it's still something that we're very involved with all the way through, and we're actually I think enjoy our jobs more knowing that we're doing initial sketches but also construction details. And I guess that kind of comes back to our office structure as 4 partners with no staff. I think that we'd all feel a little bit of a loss if we gave up the day-to-day drawing that we do, even though you may make the argument that staff who are producing drawings for us might be more profitable. I don't know that the work would necessarily be better.
I think using the BIM software too helps us to visualize things a little bit better in 3D, or explore more what spaces are like in, not just in plan, but in section elevation. And And I also think that it helps our clients understand more about the spaces that we're trying to produce. So I think that modeling things has helped us, or at least me personally, to consider the building in so many more dimensions, so many more levels, I think. And also explore the way that light enters the spaces because of the way that you can do solar studies with the 3D models. So I think light and 3 dimensions really help to kind of create different types of buildings and different types of spaces that I don't think would have been quite as easily imagined drawing on paper. And also, again, our clients can really understand what we're trying to achieve with the software.
I feel like we need some background music right now.
Hi. I was wondering, like, in the early days when you were starting out, how did you find contractors that you could trust to sort of build to the level that you designed to?
So I think one thing we were a lot of how we're here today may be based kind of largely on luck. And I guess you make your own luck to a certain extent, but we were very fortunate that we had worked in the custom residential field before. And for a number of years, Tony and Andrea and I worked together for 5 years. They had been at the same practice longer than I had. But we had met so many wonderful contractors and consultants. And so when we started, which kind of came about a lot quicker than we had first imagined, we phoned those people immediately and would probably hassle them more than they would have liked about, finding projects. Do they know people? So I think a lot of the finding good contractors and good consultants to work with was born out of a previous life that we were just fortunate enough to stumble upon. Some of those actually became clients of ours as well, which was kind of nice. So, but we've kind of built on that, and part of that's just trying to do good work and trying to get our name out there. We've never paid as such for advertising, although the one project was kind of along the lines of that. But we've been fortunate enough to be put in magazines, and we've tried to build relationships with people that want to showcase our work. And I think that's kind of naturally led to others coming to us. And we have a lot of inquiries from contractors now saying, we've seen your work, we're interested to try and work together. And it's a regular occurrence to meet new people, but it is tricky, and it's a bit of trial and error. We've had a couple of projects where we've worked with new people and it hasn't worked out, and you kind of have to figure it out a little bit on the fly, but we're always seeking new relationships with people. But as I say, in the early days, I think a lot of it was luck that we knew people that kind of came with us and wanted to continue to work with us, so we sort of built on that.
And so we've also been lucky enough to get work from builders, but also it goes the other way as well. So builders have reached out to us and are trying to introduce themselves and get us to trust them. They do presentations for us, and they kind of start to develop a relationship with us, so in hopes that we'll recommend them as well. So I think that's helped a lot.
I guess what I wanted to ask is, did you face any major obstacles while in the process that you'd like to share?
Maybe trying to raise a family at the same time as running a business, I guess. You saw some of the pictures up there of our kids. Tony and Andrea have a couple of kids. We have 3. Juggling that is maybe the single biggest obstacle, because we really try to find a balance in our lives. Like we love our clients, we love what we do, but we also have great appreciation for family life and time spent out of the office. I've personally learned to spend less time at home talking about work and to focus on my kids. And, that's taken time. I think I used to sort of talk about work all the time, and, so you kind of take a step back, but certainly trying to juggle that, and Sarah touched upon it, meeting at home to chat about the business side of things for the first couple of years was a big part of it. But yeah, I mean, it's not an obstacle that's insurmountable. We just want to find a balance. And when you run your own business, you kind of have to do everything, which is very satisfying, but can be overwhelming. And, trying to be good parents at the same time, just requires a little bit of effort, but so far so good. So I think, ask our kids maybe, I don't know.
Maybe the other obstacle or challenge would be the ups and downs. And I know that we've kind of compressed all of the good points into an hour, but that's not to say that there haven't been down months, and that's where having good people to rely on is really important.
Hi, thanks for a great presentation. I'm just curious because as a young architect, you always hear, okay, to start your own firm, you need that one big commission, right? Like just go out on your own and start your own firm. And it seems like you guys have actually, that wasn't the case for you. Or at least you had the kind of confidence to go out on your own without the assurity of having one big commission, one big project that's waiting for you. You kind of, started before that, right? Like you started in kind of an inception phase where there wasn't work waiting for you. So I'm just wondering kind of more about the catalyst for starting the firm and how you had the confidence to do that without that one big commission waiting for you out there.
I think 5 years ago we were maybe incredibly naive people, and I think that I've learned naivety goes an awful long way. Back then, and this is so true of so many things in life. I moved from England to Toronto, and I met Sarah one night in Manchester, and we now are married with kids. And sometimes you got to take a leap of faith, I guess. And when you're young or younger, it's perhaps easier to do that because you don't think things through so much. So perhaps part of our decision to kind of go out and do this was just a giant leap of faith. We try to be smart, and that's why Sarah was brought in to kind of make this whole thing work from a business standpoint. And we called the OAA. They were kind of shocked that we had a business manager. I don't think they'd really come across that before when we registered. So we try to be smart, but by the same token, you do have to just kind of have this inner confidence to go for it. And we had a lot of conversations, the four of us, where it was a should we, shouldn't we? This is a huge risk. We've got families, we have kids we have to feed. But we try to put things in place that would be smart. We took out a loan to kind of start the business, and we knew that whilst there was risk attached to that, if we kind of approach things with caution, and as Tony said, try to be good people to work with, that we always had a good chance of making it work. But absolutely, you have to have the faith to do it, and it's a big step. But honestly, if there's a single biggest takeaway for any intern architect here or anyone who's thinking about going for it is, take that leap. It's a risk, but life comes around once, and if you don't do it, you might regret it. So, we don't regret it, and we love what we do. So.
I think you're right in saying that there really probably isn't that fairy tale project out there waiting to launch your firm. But I think that, it was definitely a lot of luck. And in the early stages, maybe balancing the fact that we would do anything from toilet partition layouts, but at the same time trying to present ourselves as a professional firm, as in moving on from the kitchen table as quickly as possible. Andrea has kind of worked with Meg Graham of Supercool years back at KPMB, and she had I don't know if you want to take over, but a quick conversation with Meg after we started. One of the pieces of advice was dress for the job that you want. And it's kind of maybe a little bit cliche, and I can't really work out a way to say dress your firm for the projects that it wants, but it's again that level of setting out to actually run a real business as opposed to just trying to dip your toes in and not really coming across as serious. But yeah, probably luck, most of all.